A local woman could spend the rest of her life in jail after deputies say she shot and killed her husband.
A day after telling police he killed his wife, Joseph Ferlazzo pleads not guilty to her murder.
That Gabby Petito was strangled to death. The 22-year-old's body was found.
I found 21 who were convicted for killing domestic partners who often left them battered.
A New Hampshire man is in jail tonight in Vermont, accused of killing his wife and dismembering.
From 1980 to 2008, nearly 1 out of 5 murder victims were killed by an intimate partner. Approximately 2 out of 5 female murder victims are killed by an intimate partner. Judy Bueno Año was born on April 4th, 1943. She was born and raised in Texas with 2 older siblings and 1 younger brother. Her mother died when she was only 4 years old, and she continued to live with her grandparents. She was then abused and starved by her father and her stepmother. Later on, she graduated in 1960 and became a nursing assistant. She had 1 son, Michael, and 1 daughter. She married James Goodyear in 1962, but later on in 1971, James died on mysterious symptoms while in the hospital. After he passed, she dated Bobby Joe Morris, but he also later died in 1977 of the same mysterious symptoms in the hospital again. After his passing, Judy's son joined the army. When he visited home, he got arsenic poisoning in his blood. His arms and legs both stopped working, and he went back to Judy's home instead of going back to the army. One afternoon, when Judy and her sons Michael and James went canoeing, the canoe mysteriously overturned and Michael drowned and died due to the heavy braces of metal on his leg from his previous injury. After that, Judy began dating John Gentry, and she convinced him to take vitamins that would help him but really had arsenic in them. The vitamins made him sick and he was hospitalized. John Gentry was later discharged from the hospital and was driving his car one day when his car mysteriously exploded. The police began investigating and found out each former boyfriend and husband and her sons were all victims of arsenic poisoning. In 1984, Bueno Año was convicted for the murder of Michael and the attempted murder of John Gentry. In 1985, she was convicted of the murder of James Goodyear. Judy received a 12-year sentence for the Gentry case, a life sentence for the Michael Goodyear case, and a death sentence for the James Goodyear case. Judy was also convicted of multiple counts of grand theft and multiple acts of arson to gain insurance money. She overall collected $240,000 of insurance money. She was suspected of several other deaths, including a 1974 murder in Alabama and the 1980 death of her boyfriend, Gerald Dawsett. Judy never admitted to any of the killings, and then in 1998, at age 54, Judy was the first woman executed in Florida since 1848, and the 3rd woman executed in the U.S. since the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. Available research even shows that women are more likely to be killed by an intimate partner, such as a husband, boyfriend, same-sex partner, or ex, than by anyone else. In 2013, 15 times as many females were murdered by a male they knew than were killed by male strangers.
Chris Watts lived in Frederick, Colorado with his wife Shanann and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. On August 13, 2018, Shanann and their 2 daughters were reported missing when Shanann would not answer her friend Nicole's phone calls. Nicole went to their house, but Shanann and the girls were nowhere in sight. Chris came home to try to help to look for them. The police and Chris went to the neighbor's house and asked to look at his security cameras because they were facing the Watts' house. After they watched the film, the neighbor stated that Chris was acting weird and not like himself at all. Some days later, Chris was asked to come in and complete a polygraph test, which he failed. At this time, he confessed to having an affair with a colleague. He proceeded to explain that he told Shanann he wanted to separate when she got back from a work trip with Nicole. He then said that he saw Shanann strangling their children on the baby monitor after they had their discussion. Soon later, however, Chris admitted to killing all 3, burying Shanann's body and dumping Bella and Celeste in an oil tank. He admitted to killing them because he wanted to continue his affair with his colleague. Chris was then arrested and pleaded guilty to 9 criminal counts. He is currently in prison serving consecutive life sentences for each death.
For victims who knew their offenders, about 62% were wives, common law wives, ex-wives, or girlfriends of their offenders. In recent years, about 4.9% of male murder victims were killed by an intimate partner.
The story of a burning bed recalls the case that changed the way law enforcement treats domestic violence. Francine Hughes was born in Stockbridge, Michigan, where she grew up raised by her loving mother and watched her alcoholic father abuse her family. At the early age of 16 years old, Francine decided to drop out of high school to pursue a marriage with James Mickey Hughes. Soon after, she became a victim of domestic abuse as well. It did not take long after their marriage for Mickey to start abusing Francine. Francine describes an experience where she went shopping and bought some new clothes. As soon as Mickey saw her, he immediately ripped the clothes from her body. She said, "I don't know whether I look too pretty or what, but he didn't want me to look that way." Something as small as a word, action, or movement would set him off. He would pin her down and continuously pummel her. After years of a horrifying marriage marked by physical, verbal, and emotional abuse, Francine met with a social worker in 1971 and decided to finally divorce Mickey. Mickey denied the divorce and continued to beat Francine routinely until he got into a horrible car accident which caused Francine to take him back and nurse him back to health. But the abuse only got worse. On March 9, 1977, after 13 years of domestic abuse, Francine suffered a particularly humiliating beating from Mickey, smashing food in the kitchen, dumping out the garbage, rubbing it into my hair, hitting me, as well as burning my school books, demanding I drop out, and threatening to destroy my vehicle. Francine called the police in hopes of some help, but they refused to arrest Mickey because they did not witness any of the abuse. Once the police left, Mickey continued to beat Francine and raped her for the very last time. Francine waited until Mickey fell asleep and then gathered her 3 children into the car. She poured gasoline around and all over the bed where Mickey lay sleeping, lit a match, and drove away as her house was engulfed with flames. By the time the firefighters reached the house, Mickey had already died of smoke inhalation. Francine drove herself straight to the Ingham County Jail to turn herself in, where she immediately was arrested and charged for the murder of her husband, Mickey Hughes. At this point in time, the police refused to arrest someone for a misdemeanor unless they saw the crime being committed. In Francine's case, this meant the police came to her house repeatedly and never once arrested Mickey for domestic abuse, even though Francine physically appeared to be battered, bruised, and beaten every time. Since Mickey was fast asleep at the time of the murder, Francine's lawyer was unsure he could convince the jury that she was not guilty due to self-defense. Instead, Francine pleaded guilty due to temporary insanity. Her lawyer invoked the idea that would later become known as battered woman syndrome, a term that comes from the psychologist Lenore Walker. Based on his research with abused women in the U.S., Walker identified 3 psychological symptoms that occur in victims of intimate partner abuse: fear, guilt, and denial. This combination has been classified as a form of PTSD, which can make the level of risk in each moment surrounded by an ongoing pattern of trauma difficult to deal with. The defense worked in their favor, and Francine was acquitted in an unexpected victory for her, her family, and all of the victims of domestic abuse. The tragic case of the burning bed helps pass the Violence Against Women Act, which established a national domestic violence hotline, forced all states and jurisdictions to recognize and enforce victim protection orders, and provided funding for domestic violence training for law enforcement officers. By the time Francine Hughes passed away in 2017, domestic violence had been recognized as a major issue, but even leaves off her interview with one last quote. "I definitely take full responsibility for my actions," she says. "The only thing I do know is that if I didn't defend myself that night, it would have been me, not him."
Unfortunately, intimate partner homicide is a prevalent issue in today's society. This is a very serious issue that needs to be further addressed. Some prevention techniques include, but are not limited to, teaching safe and healthy relationship skills, disrupt developmental pathways toward partner violence, create protective environments, strengthen economic support for families, and support survivors of intimate partner violence.